Welcome to the Zion in Mind podcast. I'm your host, Leland Coford.
And I'm Bonnie Coford with UpStep Development. Today's guest is not only a 30-year veteran educator, she also has raised 4 talented children. Her broad academic expertise ranges from high poverty and incarcerated youth to advanced placement of honor students in Arizona, California, and Utah, including a vast amount of experience in understanding educational and behavioral challenges of students. And we welcome Mary Allison James.
Hi, thank you.
Well, thank you for being here. We're so glad you're here today.
My pleasure. I'm excited to share some of these things because I think we all have learned a whole lot, and what we already know, it's nice to have validated and maybe have a little bit of a checkup on how we're doing on some things. And we have some people that are just blank slates and they don't know where to start. So This is all great.
Right. So we're excited to pick your brain a little bit about the knowledge that's in your head about kids at school and how that relates to the family, how it relates to people at home, because we know that when kids have issues at home, that it doesn't stay in the walls of the 4 walls of the home, right? It branches out. So I pose a question to you. How do we know when a student is having issues at home or at school?
Well, as far as education goes, teachers are trained to pay attention to behavior and appearance. But even before that, they'll notice right away if a student has a short amount of tolerance or patience for themselves or for their classmates or for the teacher. They develop a short distance from how they're feeling to acting upon those feelings, and that's usually the first indicator. But we also see a change in habits. So the habits can be, how they take care of themselves, or, and forgetting to turn things in, forgetting to raise their hand when they're supposed to, just the little things like that. And then we also see a change in friends, perhaps, or no friends at all. That's a big indicator.
Yeah. Their friends will start changing. So we were talking before the podcast, we started airing this podcast, and you brought up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And in the hierarchy of needs, it's applied right in school.
Right. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs is one of those basic skills and understandings that all teachers need to have. It's part of their required coursework as potential teachers through child psychology, but it's also used in their classroom management and their instruction classes. They have to make sure that the kids have their basic needs taken care of, starting with their physiological needs, and that's your air, your water, your food, shelter, sleep.
So the things to keep them alive, right?
Exactly. And we always want to have more than just enough with kids, but that's the basic right there. And then once you've got that, then you can move up to safety needs, such as personal security, and for adults, or even with kids, we say employment, but feeling like you have a place, you have something that's going to keep those needs taken care of through, monetary sustenance or whatever. And it's usually not the kids that are worried about that, but they need to know that everything's taken care of for them.
So parents talking about finances is detrimental to them.
It could be, right, unless it's talked about in a positive way.
Yes.
If it's the scary financial stuff, that could affect their feelings of safety. But if it's the positive, how we're going to plan for things, and, how do we take care of money? Money's an important thing that we have to learn how to manage. All those are positive types of conversations you want to have. But other parts of safety needs would be just basic health and property, those sorts of things that we worry about. And then above that is love and belonging. And we would say that would include friendship, intimacy, family, and a sense of connection. So before we can get to feeling love and belonging, we have to have a full belly. We have to be physically comfortable. We can't be cold. We can't be ill. It's hard to feel love if we don't have those other things taken care of.
Okay, so I've got a question for you. This makes a lot of sense for a parent to be taken care of. So how does a teacher take care of these, or an administrator? How does an administrator or a teacher take care of these kinds of needs in a school setting?
So one of the things we ask for teachers to always do, I didn't say this before, I'm also an assistant principal. One of these things that we ask for our teachers to do is to keep an eye out on kids that look like, they haven't changed their clothes in a couple of days, or they look like they're physically ill. Their hair hasn't been combed or washed, or they just look like they need sleep, or they're always hungry.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because some kids associate food and love. And so I would be, when I was a teacher, I would be eating my lunch, and I could tell when a kid was either needing food or love because they'd ask me to share my lunch with them. Yeah. And at first I thought that was kind of, offensive. How they're trying to take my food. But then I realized it's actually they're wanting to connect with me, and it might be because they actually need that sustenance, or it might just be they need that connection, that feeling of love, and they are tied together. So another part of that is just feeling like they belong in that school. That's part of that third stage or level.
That third level
right.
of the Maslow's hierarchy. Yeah.
Right. And so as parents, we know when our kids are not happy because they don't feel like they have friends. But it's the same as when they feel disconnected at home. If there's people not getting along in the home, that same feeling comes into the classroom. And so we have to be able to meet all this. And to answer your question, Leland, what do we do as educators? We're looking for those things all the time. So we know that if a kid comes in and he's hungry, we're going to have granola bars or oranges or something available for them, because that's the first thing that needs to be taken care of. If they don't have a coat, they're coming in and they're cold, we're going to make sure that we have some sort of resources to provide that child a coat or some way to do that. And then we'll contact maybe our social worker, or we'll talk to someone in social services that can provide resources to that family, because that's an indicator the family's in need. And we need to support that family, because obviously we care about the kid, but we're never going to get to teach this kid until that other stuff is taken care of.
Yes. I think this is such a neat concept to see this in a Zion perspective.
Yes.
Because the whole community is rallying around these children to educate them, to make them safe, to give them an environment where they can grow in a safe place. And to have that Zion as adults and teachers, as parents, it's a beautiful thing if it runs smoothly, right?
If it runs smoothly,
but
right.
then there's those that don't run smoothly.
Right.
There's those children that do have those problems.
And kids aren't going to come up and, well, sometimes they do, but they usually don't come up and say, hey, my mom and dad are fighting at home, or, we didn't have enough to eat last night, or I stayed up all night long playing video games and I'm really tired and I don't have any ability to pay attention to what's going on. They don't say that to us. Mm-hmm. So we have to look for those things all the time. And when we see them, we know, okay, we got to backpedal and take care of that first, and then we can move on to the next levels, which is esteem comes after love and belonging, where kids can actually feel self-respect and respect for others, and feel, status recognition, all those other things that come after we feel love and belonging, until they get to the point where they want to continue to grow and to learn.
Mm-hmm. And that's where I see kids stop, where they don't have that respect for themselves. They don't have that confidence in themselves. And because they don't have that self-esteem and that confidence in themselves, they revert in. Or it's just the opposite. They lash out, right? And they get into trouble.
Right.
And they have all these issues where they're trying to control others at this point, or trying to get their attention to get their needs met.
It's a hard thing sometimes to look at a kid, and educators are by no means psychoanalysts where we're trying to always know, okay, this is what's happening at the home because we see this or that. But we can make some pretty accurate predictions when we see a student who starts to act out and do some of the things you're talking about, that it's a good chance that some of these things are not being met, either, in the classroom, because it happens in the classroom too, where, maybe he's sitting next to somebody who is, exacerbating some already tender feelings that he's having or whatever, or it's happening at home or on the playground, or it's happening somewhere. And so we just have to be kind of detectives and figure out how it's perhaps happening, how we can control it. And if it's not, then we refer it to somebody else who has a little more resource and expertise.
Yes.
Perfect.
All this is really very important for the well-being of the child and for the well-being of the family. And so Bonnie and I help families, married couples in particular, to do their part to grow their relationship. And I think it is what you said, Bonnie, an important partnership, a people, both teachers and parents, creating this safe area for the family, for education. And we like to call it a Zion, because a Zion is a protection. And so we're going to talk about what things can be done to help out in the home after we come back.
If you are frustrated with increased complaining, blaming, or silent treatments, if you have challenges with jealousy or feeling not good enough, if you are afraid of being controlled, ignored, or even cheated on, reach out to us. We help you put back the bounce in his step and the sparkle in her eyes. We are UpStep Development, marriage and life coaches. We sponsored this program for you. Reach us at upstepdevelopment.com.
Welcome back, and we're glad to have Mary Allison James on this podcast this morning with us and get her insight on how the things that are happening inside the home actually affect how school goes, and vice versa. So if there's problems at school with a child, then it's affecting the life in the home as well. And we've been talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the different 5 levels that it has. And to have the basic needs, Mary, of a child is so essential to make sure that they have good food and a place for safety, and have that place where they can start feeling love for themselves and feel like they can start expanding and growing and have confidence in themselves, right?
Because super important.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Super important. I also, I haven't really thought about this, and I would say I thought about it once I went through my divorce. I went through a divorce a few years ago, and I learned how to navigate the parenting waters all by myself with 4 kids, which was a lot of fun, and it was really hard.
Probably a big eye opener, right?
Totally. And suddenly you can't blame it on the other person, because now it's you.
They're not there, right?
They're not there, right? So there were some things that I started to lean on my teaching experience and my just my studies to know, okay, how do I help organize my home, and how do I help make my the things that I can control a little bit more predictable for everybody, knowing that was really the next part of creating this feeling of safety in the home. And some of the things that come up is, what events are going to affect learning in school? And the answer is everything. Absolutely everything affects learning in school. And that's kind of a heavy burden on parents. Maybe they think, oh my gosh, I have to worry about this and that. And you do, to a degree. But, if you'll go back to the idea of, do they have their physiological needs met? Do they feel safe? Do they feel loved and that they belong? And then are they working on developing their self-esteem? Then if you're working on just paying attention to those things, I think you don't have to worry about too many of the details that way. But I would say that knowing that you need to have some sort of structure in the home to help things be more safe feeling and predictable. Just knowing that things are predictable does something for human beings, and it works for all of us. And you'll probably note this is truth for yourself as well. Our brains are kind of like computers. And if we're running too many programs simultaneously, the whole system slows down if it doesn't shut down altogether.
Right. So you indicated that it's a burden for parents. So how are parents and teachers able to partner up? How are they able to work together?
Well, I love that you asked that. And, it's kind of counterintuitive, because lots of times parents think, well, this is home business. This is private business. It's family. We don't talk about that with everybody else.
Yes.
And you certainly don't need to go into great detail, but if you can share with the teacher or, the administrator or, the social worker, if there happens to be one at the school, that, hey, Jill's having probably some challenges at school because her father and I are having challenges at home, or dad lost his job, and I know
Or
she's
grandma and
worried.
grandpa died
Grandma and grandpa
with
died.
COVID,
Yes,
right?
we've had that. It's been a very difficult thing, to the point where we've asked teachers to not prioritize pushing education, prioritize helping kids feel safe and that things are going to be okay, and really focus on that, and that the other will take care of itself. Because
it does fall into place, doesn't it?
Yes.
Once you hit the bottom layer of the hierarchy, then once that's covered, the next level
next
just
thing,
automatically
it
comes.
automatically happens. In fact, human beings crave it.
They do.
They will push it.
And they
Right.
crave the structure. Kids will crave structure. In fact, they will actually try and push the boundaries to see if mom and dad, right, will,
absolutely.
will break the boundary.
They will
and
say, "Isn't
get
it
away
time
with it."
for this?" Or, "I thought we weren't allowed to do that, Mom."
Yeah, yeah.
I was
yeah.
actually a teacher of little teeny kids, and we had this routine that we went through, and we changed the routine even just the littlest bit. It's like, just everything broke loose. And it's like, no, it's not time for snacks. It's time for balls. Like, oh dear. And
They depend upon it. That is part of what I'm referring to with the computer program. If they know that that's in place, that's the operating program. They don't have to worry about the operating program. Then they can put all their energy into the learning part.
Right.
And that's what play is for kids, right? It's learning. So, and that's the same for us as adults. Once we have our stuff taken care of here, which is really the idea of the structure. So if you have a structure where there's the same go to bed time, the same wake up time, the same, we have breakfast, lunch, dinner, however you want to do that, the same prayer time, if that's what your family does, that stuff, kids learn to depend upon that. That becomes their foundation.
Exactly.
And it makes things feel safe and predictable.
I have to tell a story. So I had the opportunity to head out of state and go down to Arizona and be with my sister. Now, she had triplets. They're now 2 years old, but to be in a house with a daughter who is 5 years old, and then to have these 2-year-old triplets. The daughter Jordan just turned 2 a couple weeks ago, but to see the chaos happened with these 4 children under the age of 5, just running around all over the place. But when the structure came, it was beautiful. They wanted it. They looked forward to it. And so at nighttime, these kids knew exactly to grab what they call their bees. It's their blanket, their comfort blanket. And they all had their each little blanket. And then mom bought these little itty bitty little couches that fold out into a bed. And they were all in the living room, and they all got into their little bed. And then mom brought them a nutrition drink. And so the lights went down, but they knew they went right to that spot that they knew that structure with. And they calmed right down, and it was soothing and quiet. It was wonderful to see that structure. And so I agree with you. Those kids want that structure. They look forward to that structure.
Yes, they do. And in fact, it's kind of a eye-opening experience to go visit a kindergarten or a preschool and just watch how they have everything structured. And then they'll have a transition from this activity to that activity. And the kids just thrive. They know this comes next, and they get excited about it. And then when they go home, they can report, these are the things that we did today, as opposed to if it's all over the place and there isn't a particular box, so to speak, for when we do this or when we do that. It kind of all bleeds together, and they don't necessarily remember things or learn things at the same rate. So structure is really important.
Yes.
Isn't it really interesting? The same thing happens with adults.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we help married couples, and one of the first things we encourage people to do is to get a structure.
Yes.
An AM routine and a PM routine.
Yes.
And it really helps.
It transforms them.
Yes, it
It
totally
helps them.
does.
It really does.
To have that structure. They know what to anticipate. They know what to look forward to, right?
So I did want to talk about that just a little bit. That structure, I have 3 biological daughters, 1 through marriage, and when they started talking about having families, and then I actually have 2 grandchildren now, the question was, what's the most important thing that I need to do? And I told them, bedtime. Have a bedtime. And, for little ones, there's lots of bedtimes, right? When they're really tiny.
Yes.
But you start off with that predictability, and the kids just flourish when they have enough, that means they have enough sleep, and they're not going to go to sleep unless they have food in their belly, and they're not going to fall asleep if the house is all chaotic. And there are structures that sort of promote other structures, and bedtime is one of them.
Yes.
I can't go to sleep until I have my snack.
Your warm milk and cracker.
And graham cracker, yeah.
Got it.
That's his B.
Yeah.
My B.
That's his.
Yeah. Graham
His
cracker.
security.
Does it start with a B? Okay, sorry.
Well, it's interesting too that kids, it seems that when kids are starting to act out, that there are problems in the home. And with this weekend away, I actually took some of my sisters with me to go down to Arizona to see my sister that had the triplets, and we had a good conversation. And one of the sisters had mentioned that her best friend's child was starting to act out. And so mom took the child at one point and started talking to the child, what's going on, what's happening. And finally the child opened up and said, "It's all my fault." And mom was going, "Oh, what's your fault, sweetheart?" And the child said, "You and daddy are arguing and it's my fault. It's my fault. I've got to stop doing something." So these little kids' mind, I want people to realize that these little kids' minds are not developed like an adult. Their cognitive skills do not develop all the way until they're 19 for a girl and 21 for a boy, 21 to 23
I think it's
for a
older,
boy.
Bonnie, actually.
You've seen it, right? Right.
Okay.
25.
Okay.
There we go.
I think you're leaning up on me now.
Yeah. So, for them to see a parent argue, they can't comprehend and analyze it. And so a lot of these children are taking on that responsibility, taking on that burden that they feel like they need to fix it. And a lot of it starts with the parents in the home.
Yes.
Are you seeing that?
I see it all the time. Kids love, as much as you love your children, they love their parents. And they want things to be predictable. They want things to be safe. They want things to be good for their parents too. Not just, they don't have the ability to say, "I want that for myself," but they can see when other people are hurting, and they can see when things need some order. And you can change a whole lot in a child's life just by telling him everything is going to be okay. This is how we do things, and put it back into that structure of living. That then they do have some capacity to deal with other things that might come up as well, because the other things are taking care of them. Going back to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I always like to use the computer analogy. When you have too many things going on in your mind, such as, okay, I'm going to worry about when I'm going to eat, or I'm not going to be able to go to my friend's house because I don't have clean clothes to wear, or I'm not going to be able to maybe do my homework because there's no place on the table to do my homework because everything's
messy or
a
dirty,
mess.
or
Right. There's no order in the
there's
home.
no order.
It adds to their burden, and they aren't able to use their cognitive functioning at the same level they would be able to. So, so clearing all that out, and it's the same for adults, like you were saying, Leland. When things are all put together in order, we have a better ability to deal and be resilient than when we don't have those things.
And life goes a little bit better when we're in a place where we have structure as an adult. So when we come back, I would love to get into your understanding of what Benjamin Franklin said and intervention.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll be right back.
Today's sponsor is Temple in Mind. Gazing upon the house of the Lord reminds us of the simple phrase, "Choose the right." This powerful reminder turns us back to temples time and time again, and gives us the strength to carry on through the best and worst of times. They love temples and what they represent, so they have a collection of timeless, unique items to help keep your home centered around what really matters. At Temple in Mind, they have something for everyone and every occasion. They hope you'll be as excited as they are to help light the world with items that truly keep temples in mind. Visit their store at the University Place Mall in Orem, Utah, or check out their website at templeinmind.com.
Welcome back. And Mary, just before the break, we were talking about how children take on the responsibility of becoming the adult when they see their parents have financial issues, when they see their parents arguing, anything that's in the home, they are then taking on the adult responsibility, and their little minds can't handle that. Their little
Correct.
minds are not formed to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, could we talk a little bit more about that?
So some of the things that we see in school, and I see it even in my staff, my adult teaching
Adult
staff.
people.
Adult do this too, right? When things are spinning out of control, they kind of shoot their. They get out of their lane, let's put it that way.
Okay.
They start to do things that are not within the realm of what their responsibilities are because they're trying to feel like things are safe and in control again. And so little kids do it when they see things going on in the home that feel disorganized or disruptive or somehow disharmonious. They create a feeling of disorder and lack of peace in the home. So they too will reach out and try to put it back into order. And one way they do that, as you mentioned before, is they start trying to blame themselves. They essentially take on the role of the parent and say, okay, it must be my fault, because something is going on that I can't control. So one way we can help kids to not feel that responsibility is to talk to them, to let them know this is what your job is. Your job is to, go back to these Maslow's hierarchy of needs or whatever. If they have responsibilities at home and they're not big responsibilities, they're responsibilities that they own, those sorts of things help them feel like they have control over things. And it makes it feel like the world is not spinning out of control because they have some control over something.
So what are some of the specifics you might give a child to do so that it's not overwhelming, so that it's something they can do? I guess it would be age appropriate.
Age appropriate,
okay.
right. So depending upon their age, but it's always going to be about their environment
Okay.
and their own, which would include their physical body.
Okay.
So, your job is to dress yourself, to have your clothes, out for the next day, or your job is to brush your teeth or to comb your hair. A little bit older, then it becomes you're responsible for where you sleep or your bedroom, or you just break it and you just keep adding on to responsibility a little at a time.
And that brings up what you had said before the
Yes,
podcast.
yes.
And that is what Benjamin Franklin taught you. Not that you were in his era, but he taught you through.
Hey,
Bonnie, come on.
Well, the way I started saying it, right?
No, I kind of wish I would have been around to see him in action because he's a hero of mine. I just think he's an amazing human being, and I always speak in present tense because I think he's listening.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He's right on your shoulder.
and maybe he'll inspire me to come up with something great. But he said that he was this kind of guy who was always trying to improve himself. He was an inventor, right?
Right.
He was. He did all these amazing things. He was a businessman. He was a statesman. He was a diplomat. He tinkered around with things constantly. He was kind of the Da Vinci of his time, I guess you could say, in some ways.
Yeah.
And he wanted to start like I do every New Year's, improve some things about himself. So he'd take on this thing and that thing and this thing and that thing, and he realized you can't do it all at once. You need to take a little bit at a time, one thing, master that thing, and then you can add on another thing. Kind of going back to what you said, Leland, about little kids. They have to master something.
Okay.
We all need to have that feeling where we've actually mastered something, because that's where we get that self-esteem from, is from our self-actualization. They actually feed each other.
Oh, okay.
So when your child does something great, acknowledge it, make them feel great about it. That just continues to make it grow. And it's the same for us as adults as well. But one of the things we tend to do when we realize, okay, we need to provide structure for our kids and we need to make sure we're taking care of those things. And if you're anything like me, like, okay, we're going to do this and that, and we're going to be super organized, and here's the chore chart, and here's the, we can go overboard with it. So especially when kids are in traumatic situations, that's not the time to give them hyper structure on everything. Give them what's predictable, what's already been there, then add a little bit on. So I would say, hopefully you've got the bedtime, then add on the dinner time with the whole family. That's super important, the predictability of having dinner with the family. Once you've got that, then you can add on maybe breakfast with the family, if that's a possibility. Or maybe it's an activity on Saturdays that you all get together and you do, or your Sunday has some structure to it, or whatever. A little at a time, so it's not too much of a shock to the system, I guess you could say.
And overwhelming.
And overwhelming for you as a parent, too, because you got to figure it out, too. So
yeah.
Little until it's mastered. So.
And this is most important when there's a big change in the
Oh,
family.
huge.
Okay.
And that's kind of what we're talking about when there's turmoil going on in the home. We want to have structure. It's super important to have that, but don't go overboard. And I would say that you want to always remember that your home is a refuge and a sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
You're always trying to protect that part. That's where your home becomes something even of a religious sort of
A
feeling
Zion.
to it, a Zion.
Yes,
right?
a Zion.
Right.
Yes.
You want to have that because that's where your kids go home to recharge. That's where you go home to recharge.
Yes.
And you need that structure so that you can recharge, but you don't want the structure to become a burden in itself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and there's so many parents out there that are single parents nowadays, and there are so many parents out there that are together with a partner, but yet they are struggling in themselves. And that does have a reflection on the children pick that up. There's
Yes.
no two buts about hiding that.
Yep.
And there are parents that come to Leland and I constantly with those issues of what do we do to make it our home feel safe? What do we do to make it so that our kids are going to be okay? And I love what you're saying, Mary, because when you bring that structure in and you don't try and change things up as much as possible, keep to the routine and get them to bed on time, get them their bellies fed, get them clothed, brush their hair, send them out the door with lots of hugs and kisses, and look at them in the eyes. Take them off their devices
Yes.
and look them in the eyes and tell them that you love them, you know, and that they matter, makes a big importance to that child. That's a huge, huge thing.
Right.
I agree. I would say that, you know, we're taught, we go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs over and over again, but there's lots of ways to love. Love doesn't have to be the hugs and the kisses and the, you know, some of the traditional ways we think of love. Love is providing a place where people can feel love,
Yes.
providing a structure and a time and the physicality of things, the clean home, the good smells. You know, those things don't cost money. It just takes a little bit of attention to that sort of thing.
Yes.
It helps kids to feel that I'm okay. Everything's going to be okay because this is home.
So one of the things that I have noticed with children, if they're disconnecting, they're not looking at you in the eye and they're disconnecting from family life and they're reclusive or again, lashing out, that's when an adult needs to be aware that there's something going on
Right.
with the child. And so you suggested talking. Are there any other things that are interventions that can help a child as parents? What can we do for our child of interventions that we can help our children with?
Well, we've really kind of talked a lot about the predictability, the structure, and combining those things with sustenance and needs and that sort of thing. I think that's all super important. I don't want to say that's all there is, but you have to do the foundational stuff first. You can't get to the good conversations, the deep conversations,
Oh, okay.
until you have all that other stuff put together.
Isn't it true? You can't have that connection, can
Right,
you?
right. So
Yeah.
that device is their way of dealing with not feeling secure about something. That device is their way of hiding from something that's bothering them. And so your job is to try to figure out by eliminating, it's a process of elimination, make sure all the basics are taken care of. Then you only have a few things that you're working with as opposed to everything else.
Okay. So this conversation has been really very important and very helpful. Thank you very much for being here.
You bet.
Just finally, what one message, or what is the main message that you would like to leave with parents?
I would say be your child's predictable source of love in all of its forms. Sustenance and safety, structure, and spiritual reinforcement. You can't really get to that spiritual reinforcement, which is ultimately what we're all trying to get to, until all the other stuff is taken care of. So do not underestimate the value of those little things that seem like they're not that important. At the same time, don't make it become its own burden. Having that relationship time with your kids is the most important thing.
Beautiful.
Very
Beautiful.
good.
Thank
Well-
you again so much for being here.
Yes. So Mary, Allison, James, we thank you for being here and giving us so much information. It's been very helpful and very
Informative.
Absolutely.
Great.
So this has been the Zion and Mind podcast. I'm Leland Coford.
And I'm Bonnie Coford with UpStep Development.
See you later.
Bye.
This podcast has been brought to you by Temple in Mind and UpStep Development. Thanks for listening.